This is SpaceTime Series 29, Episode 54, for broadcast on the 6th of May 2026. Coming up on SpaceTime, new evidence shows that the two outer rings of the ice giant Uranus have starkly different origins. Scientists warn that the African continent is now breaking apart much faster than previously thought. And rocket engine issues have been blamed for the failure of the maiden flight of Gilmour Space's Eris rocket. All that and more coming up on SpaceTime.
Welcome to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary.
Astronomers have discovered that two of the planet Uranus's outer rings have very different compositions and so must have come from completely different origins. The findings, reported in the journal Geophysical Research Planets, show that the epsilon and Nu rings have different colours and are reflecting light differently. The discovery is based on new spectroscopical observations by the Keck Observatory on Mauna Kea in Hawaii and by the Hubble and Webb space telescopes. These two rings are peculiar because they're extremely faint and orbit within the planet's crowded system of 14 inner moons. By decoding the light from these rings, astronomers can trace both their particle size distribution and their composition, and that in turn sheds light on their origins, offering new insights into how the Uranian system and other ice giant planets like it formed and evolved. The study's lead author M.K. DePatta from the University of California, Berkeley, says the findings point to very different origin stories. Though they orbit the same planet, Uranus's epsilon and Nu rings are fundamentally different. Prior observations with Keck and Hubble showed that the epsilon ring appeared blue, a signature characteristic of extremely small particles, while the Nu ring's reddish hue points to a more typical dusty origin. However, exactly why the rings were so different has remained a mystery. But then, when the Webb Space Telescope came online and observed Uranus, the authors used all its data, taken at different wavelengths, in combination with the Keck and Hubble data, to construct a new complete spectrum from visible through to infrared. By analysing how sunlight reflects off the rings, the authors identified a strong absorption feature near a wavelength of 3 microns, 3 millionths of a metre, and it was visible in the infrared for both rings. Beyond that shared feature, the differences became clear when simulating the detailed spectra. The epsilon ring closely matches the spectral signature for water ice, while the Nu ring is clearly composed of rocky material mixed with approximately 10 to 15% carbon-rich organic compounds, which are commonly found in the outer solar system. The epsilon ring appears to be made up of tiny ice grains knocked off the planet's small 12-kilometre-wide moon Mab as a result of micrometeorite impacts. Interestingly, the icy composition of the epsilon ring also confirms that the moon Mab is also composed mostly of water ice. DePatta says, in contrast, the Nu ring material is sourced from micrometeorite impacts and collisions between unseen rocky bodies rich in organic materials, which must be in orbit between some of Uranus's known moons. One interesting question is why the parent bodies sourcing these rings are so different in composition. Uranus's rings were first discovered back in 1977, when astronomers observed a star dim several times as the planet passed in front or occulted it, indicating a surrounding ring system. At that time, only Saturn was known to have rings, making Uranus only the second known ring planet in our solar system. Since then, we've discovered that all the giants have rings: Jupiter, Saturn, Uranus and Neptune. But unlike Saturn's bright, easily visible rings, those on the other giants, including Uranus's rings, are faint and narrow, making them far more difficult to study. Over the decades, additional rings have been identified using NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft and Hubble observations, gradually revealing a far more complex system. The giant 10-metre Keck telescopes, together with Hubble, played a key role in science's understanding of the Uranian system. Hubble's observations between 2003 and 2005 led to the discovery of the epsilon and Nu rings, and Keck helped characterise them, including providing the first evidence that the epsilon ring is blue, whereas the Nu ring appears red. These colour differences hinted at fundamental variations in particle size and composition, but the data was limited. At the time, the only ring in our solar system that was blue was Saturn's E ring. And this ring is produced by geyser activity on the Saturnian ice moon Enceladus, which orbits Saturn in the E-ring, and its geysers that spew out tiny icy grains from the moon's south pole tiger stripes. These grains originate in a global subsurface ocean beneath Enceladus's frozen crust. But Uranus's MAB appears too small to be cryovolcanically active. And so the new results raise an interesting question. Why is MAB the source of the Epsilon ring? And why is it so different to Uranus's other rockier inner moons? Needless to say, ongoing studies of the system will play a crucial role in answering this mystery. This report on the many mysteries of Uranus from NASA TV.
Uranus is the 7th planet from the Sun and the 3rd largest planet in the solar system. It also may have the coldest interior, emitting far less heat than its counterparts Jupiter, Saturn, and Neptune. It is known as an ice giant because it contains more ices, including water, methane, and ammonia, than Jupiter or Saturn. And while NASA's learned a great deal about this planet over the last 3 decades, there's a lot more waiting to be discovered. Back in 1986, NASA's Voyager 2 spacecraft flew by Uranus, making it the first and only spacecraft to visit this distant planet. Previous observations showed that Uranus has a unique tilt of its axis, so it rotates almost on its side, causing its poles to actually face the Sun. No other planet in our solar system has this feature. In its quick sprint past Uranus, Voyager discovered 10 new moons orbiting the planet that had not been seen before, and in the decades since, even more have been found. During its encounter, Voyager also saw new faint rings and explored the complex magnetosphere. Voyager only briefly viewed the planet's 5 major moons: Ariel, Miranda, Titania, Oberon, and Umbriel. These moons have a wide variety of terrains and geological features, some of which indicate possible subsurface oceans. Small Miranda has chaotic terrain, with deep canyons and tall mountains, but is likely now frozen solid. Ariel appears to have the youngest surface, with few impact craters. While Titania has a very old surface, the lack of large craters and presence of a large canyon system may indicate ancient resurfacing. Oberon is also covered with craters and has valleys and large mountains. Umbriel's surface is the darkest of the Uranian moons, and it sports a strange polar ring. The origin of this ring is still a mystery, but scientists believe that it may have been formed by an icy impact. Since Voyager, ground-based telescopes and the Hubble Space Telescope have played the leading role in our understanding of Uranus. Since 1992, Hubble has watched the slowly changing Uranian seasons, including changes in its unusual pale blue color and polar hazes. Telescopes have also revealed that Uranus has a complex weather system with massive storms that can last for months or even years, with wind speeds over 500 miles per hour. The ongoing search for ocean worlds and life beyond Earth makes Uranus an exciting target for the James Webb Space Telescope and for future up-close exploration. New data will help scientists to understand the formation and evolution of Uranus, as well as its moons and rings, and provide clues as to whether liquid water may reside beneath their icy crusts. The fascinating properties of this planet, discovered in just the span of a few decades, reveal that unlocking mysteries here can help scientists learn even more about our solar system and our place in it.
This is Space Time. Still to come, new evidence show that Africa is breaking apart much faster than scientists had previously thought, and engine failure has been blamed for the loss of the Eris rocket on its maiden flight from North Queensland. All that and more still to come on Space Time. A new study claims Africa is much closer to being physically torn apart into 2 separate continents than previously thought, possibly as soon as a few million years from now. The findings, reported in the journal Nature, show part of the Great East African Rift Valley system, known as the Turkana Rift, is far thinner than scientists had previously understood. The Turkana Rift is a 500-kilometre wide, low-lying region that spans Kenya and Ethiopia, which is splitting apart at a rate of about 4.7 millimetres a year, causing the underlying planetary crust to thin significantly. The Great East African Rift System runs from the Afar Depression in northeastern Ethiopia down to Mozambique in the south, with the African-Nubian tectonic plate on one side and the Arabian and Somali plates on the other. Along the rift's axis, the crust, the rocky outermost layer of the planet, which rests on the Earth's shifting mantle, is just 13 kilometres thick. That's significantly thinner compared to the more than 35-kilometre thick crust further away from the rift centre, and is a telltale sign of a process geologists call necking. Scientists believe the Turkana Rift began pulling apart about 45 million years ago, and it's causing the Earth's crust to stretch horizontally, resulting in it buckling and fracturing, releasing magma from deep below. The authors estimate that the necking started after widespread volcanic eruptions around 4 million years ago. They say it may be just several million years before the next phase, known as oceanization, begins. At that stage, magma will rise through the fractures to form new seafloor, and water from the Indian Ocean to the north will flood in. The authors also uncovered signs of an earlier rifting episode that didn't lead to a full continental split. However, instead, it left the crust thinner and weaker, and that set the stage for the current phase of activity. This is Space-Time. Still to come, engine issues blamed for the failure of the maiden flight of the Eris rocket, and later in the science report, scientists have discovered a new way for some coronaviruses to infect humans. All that and more coming up on Space-Time. The investigation into the failure of the maiden flight of the Eris rocket last year has traced the problem to two of the launch vehicle's hybrid rocket engines. The Eris-1 launched from the Bowen spaceport on the Queensland Pacific coast back on July the 30th last year, marking what should have been Australia's first orbital rocket launch since flights from the Woomera rocket range in outback South Australia ended in the early 1970s. The investigation by Gilmour Space concluded that the vehicle experienced an in-flight anomaly with one of its 4 first-stage rocket engines, which lost thrust just 9 seconds after liftoff. Then a second rocket engine exhibited a similar problem at around T plus 17 seconds. The combination dramatically reduced vehicle performance, bringing the mission to an early end. Investigators say they've identified 2 independent failure modes originating from the oxidizer pump subsystem. Electrical and thermal faults were observed in the electric pump motors and associated inverters, indicating components sourced from an external supplier. Mission managers say the findings provide a clearer understanding of the underlying causes. They say that based on the findings of the investigation, design, qualification and process improvements are now being evaluated and implemented. As with all first test flights, the Eris-1 mission was designed to generate flight data and uncover conditions which can't be fully replicated in ground testing. Data from Flight Test 1 will provide updates to vehicle design and operations as Gilmour Space prepares for a second Eris test flight sometime later this year. A final report based on the investigation's findings has now been submitted to the Australian Space Agency in coordination with the Office of the Space Regulator. This is Space-Time. And time now to take another brief look at some of the other stories making news in science this week with a science report. Scientists have discovered a new way for some coronaviruses to infect humans. The findings, reported in the journal Nature, could be a potential new threat to human health. Of all the types of coronaviruses, scientists know the most about how beta coronaviruses enter human cells. That's the same group that Chinese government scientists genetically engineered, resulting in the COVID-19 pandemic. However, researchers know far less about alpha coronaviruses, although both rely on spike proteins to get into human cells. The authors were testing a variety of alpha coronaviruses and found that one virus spike protein from a virus isolated from hart-nosed bats in Kenya could enter human cells using a receptor in the human cells called CEA-CAM6. Related alpha coronaviruses from Africa, Europe and East Asia also use the same receptor. While blood samples from people living near the bat sampling site showed no evidence of widespread infection, the authors say these findings do identify a potential threat to human health, as well as identifying one of the details needed to enhance pandemic preparedness and prevention efforts. The Australian Army's acquiring an additional 268 Bushmaster infantry mobility vehicles under a new $1.2 billion contract. The armoured troop transports, which are built in the Victorian town of Bendigo, will be equipped with directed energy weapons, in other words, laser cannons, and they'll have more powerful engines compared to earlier versions of these vehicles, which were highly successful in Australian Defence Force operations in both Iraq and Afghanistan, thanks to their ability to survive landmines and IEDs. More than 1,300 Bushmasters are already deployed with the Australian Defence Force. They're fitted with a range of weapons, ranging from turret-mounted machine guns to rocket and missile launchers. The vehicles are also used by the Defence Forces of Britain, the Netherlands, New Zealand, the Ukraine, Fiji, Japan, Indonesia and Jamaica. The new deal will also see the Australian Army purchase additional Hawkeye light protection mobility vehicles. There are 1,100 Hawkeyes already in ADF service. While the 15-ton Bushmaster is designed to carry 10 troops, the much smaller 7-ton Hawkeye carries 4 and is also designed to withstand landmines and IEDs. A new study has found that most teenagers aged 16 and 18 have been sent texting messages, often from strangers. The findings, reported in the journal Sexual Behaviour, were part of a long-term Norwegian study involving 743 teens. Subjects were first asked how often they had sent intimate images or videos of themselves in which they were undressed and exposed their breasts or genitalia. The authors found that around 8% of 14-year-olds, 31% of 16-year-olds and 39% of 18-year-olds had engaged in such texting, usually to a romantic acquaintance. Most teens sexted on their preferred social media platforms, such as Snapchat or Instagram. But the study also found it was far more common for teens to receive sexting messages, with 39% of 14-year-olds and 70% of 16 and 18-year-olds having been sent such messages, and these mostly came from strangers. The authors say girls were far more likely to receive texting messages from strangers, while boys were more likely to get them from friends. Samsung are urgently trying to fix a bad update that's affecting millions of Samsung cell phones, causing their batteries to drain quickly, with reports the batteries in some phones are also overheating. With the details, we're joined by technology editor Alex Zaharov-Reut from TechAdvice.life.
Yeah, this is with the Samsung Galaxy S24 and S25. And there was an April update that had 47 bug patches and fixes inside. You know, it's important to install updates. Well, this particular one is causing the battery to drain 30 to 50% in just a few hours. And the phone is getting, according to people who've got it, noticeably warmer. Samsung has sadly had battery problems before with the Note 7 series, which they had to recall because it was exploding. Clearly, that's not something we hear about too much with phones anymore. I mean, there's been no major scandal since. We do hear a lot about exploding batteries in e-scooters, and, you know, it can be the case when an electric vehicle crashes. If the battery gets damaged, it can cause a runaway thermal reaction that emits chemicals like a jet. That's not happening here with this update. There will obviously be a fix at some point, but if you've got a Samsung Galaxy S24 or S25 and you have installed the update and the battery is draining really fast, you're not imagining it. It's something that's really happening, and the users just have to wait for the fix.
But that's a scary thing. If the battery is overheating, there's always the potential of failure.
Yeah, heat is the enemy of batteries. That's why you shouldn't leave any devices with batteries in a hot car during summer, for example. So battery technology is one of those things where the processing power of chips and the amount of transistors that a chip has, according to Moore's law, doubles every 18 months. I was in at an Intel event in 2007 in Beijing. They had a session there on batteries. I mean, this is nearly 20 years ago now. They were talking at the time about using silver in batteries. The silver could be recycled and reused once the battery had gone through enough charging cycles. And what struck me was that they said that battery technology doubles in its performance and capability every 18 years. And, of course, today's batteries are far more advanced. But what we really need to see is a change in battery chemistry. lithium titanate is an alternative to lithium ion that can have tens of thousands of recharge cycles. It can operate in much colder and hotter temperatures, and if it's damaged, it does not explode. There's also technology like sodium ion, which is being used in home batteries, and it too is effectively impervious to this sort of destruction. So we're in a time where lithium ion is more widely used than ever, but it can be extremely dangerous. And thankfully, over the next decade or so, we're going to start seeing lithium-ion being phased out and these other better battery technologies being introduced.
And they're already being used in the military.
Well, yeah, I mean, lithium titanate's actually been used in the military for decades, but it was just not commercially viable to be used in phones at the time, and people were using it in the military because it wouldn't easily be an internal bomb if it was damaged. If military equipment was being powered by lithium titanate batteries, it was much safer. But now that has changed. We're going to be seeing home appliances that use lithium titanate batteries.
That's Alex Zaharov-Reutt from TechAdvice.life. And this is Space Time. And that's the show for now. SpaceTime is available every Monday, Wednesday and Friday through Bytes.com, SoundCloud, YouTube, your favourite podcast download provider, and from SpaceTimeWithStuartGarry.com. SpaceTime's also broadcast through the National Science Foundation on Science Zone Radio and on both iHeartRadio and TuneIn Radio. And you can help to support our show by visiting the SpaceTime store for a range of promotional merchandising goodies, or by becoming a SpaceTime patron, which gives you access to triple-episode commercial-free versions of the show, as well as lots of bonus audio content which doesn't go to air, access to our exclusive Facebook group, and other rewards. Just go to SpaceTimeWithStuartGarry.com for full details.
You've been listening to SpaceTime with Stuart Gary. This has been another quality podcast production from Bytes.com.